Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I am doing a spotlight on Ulraunt's Guide to the Plains, specifically talking about Acheron. This is quite an extensive PDF. We're looking at 300 plus pages here. You can find this now on DM's Guild, and while I am talking through the PDF, which was sent to me, so thank you so much, Mark, for sending me a copy of this to spotlight and talk through. I will put links in the description as to where you can find this on DM's Guild. The PDF is $29.99, and there are many links where you can look into purchasing some actual physical hardcover books and whatnot, softcover book, hardcover book, and so on. I'll let you kind of digest the information based on that. But this thing went through the full treatment where the intention by those at Quill and Cauldron and Mark and the creators here that are involved, this is not just a PDF and kind of a throwaway thing. This is a big tome, 300 pages. It is meant to stand alongside official books that are out there. While this, of course, is DM's Guild material and it's not official material, the breadth and the scope and the ambition behind this, especially going into print in hardcover format, we're looking at a real thing here, a product that I want to chew through. So let's get into this. Let's see what's what. Once again, this was sent to me by Mark, so thank you so much for that. I will break this down, talk through it a little bit. Ulraunt's Guide to the Plains, Acheron. Some really cool blurbs of information and artwork. I like this stuff here. The front cover looks really good. I'm fond of this font. I like it a lot. Acheron there on the front. Really cool piece of artwork. I like it. This will be a kind of an interesting take on this whole spotlight. I'm going to try and be as objective as possible with all of my stuff. It's not so much a review. I will talk through some glaring things if I feel like I have a real issue with something, or if there's something that I'm really excited about and I think is a real strong selling point. Of course, I'll kind of give my opinions, and that's, I think, the intention. And the hope of what was being asked of me in the email when this was sent is they value my thoughts on such things. So I will give my opinions, but I'm going to try and be as objective as possible. So what are we getting in this 308 pages? What's here? This book is intended to aid Dungeon Masters storytelling and world building, as well as provide a framework to build higher level adventures with. Many of the creatures within have roots in real world myths and fantasy literature, while some are based on monsters from previous editions. So you have 4 parts. Part 1 delves into the various locations with the rest of the book, which the rest of the book attempts to populate. The locations are intended to make it easier for a DM to bring an adventure into planes beyond the material. Obviously, we talked about it as Acheron, so because things are so sort of epic level and high tier of gameplay, we're talking of, worlds and venturing through stories and adventure beyond the material plane. Part 2 introduces the various deities from Acheron, exceptionally powerful creatures. Part 3 gets into, it says here, while most of the book is aimed at the DM, Part 3 is for the character, for the PCs that are playing in it. Here's some character options. What are some new sub-races or subclasses? What are some new race options? What are some new spells? And then Part 4 has kind of like your stat blocks and sort of your bestiary type of stuff. Everything in the first sections, or throughout most of the book, I should say, but it really comes about mostly in the first part, is read through the perspective of this guy named Ulraunt. Remember the title of the book, Ulraunt's Guide to the Plains. So Ulraunt is this very powerful wizard sitting in Candlekeep, and he's kind of telling you the story. As we start to scroll through beyond that, we get into a bunch of sections that kind of indicate to us sort of what's here, right? Some subheadings and various things like that. It's going to show you, I like this, where you're dealing with some really high CR stuff here, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I like that it gives you kind of that breakout, the things that you might find in the encounter section of the DMG, or what I've been using a lot lately, the encounter building guidelines in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So I like that it gives you all of this information of how I might be able to take some of these real high, never before seen really, by me at least, CR monsters and wrangle these into some sort of a campaign, like where might they fit. So I like that it gives you those charts up front. But now as we start to get through, we start getting into a lot of text, right? There's just a lot of story, a lot to read. As I said, you're going to get a lot of stuff that is presented from sort of the perspective of Ulraunt speaking to you in-game. As we delve further into part 1, notice, there's a lot, and you can tell because it's italicized, and there's just a different style and aesthetic to it all. There's a lot of information here as though Ulraunt is speaking to you. He's telling you a story. He's trying to get you invested into this thing. And then you have this little blurb here where it's kind of like pulling you away from that and read this, and here's some information that you might want to know as a real life person reading this. And then as we continue to get through, there's just a lot of information to churn through. you start getting into these different optional rules and environmental things that you might want to consider if you're traveling into this place. And you keep going, getting into Acheron, right? There's just a lot to digest. It's difficult to get very quickly the gist of what do my PCs see? What can I bring to my table? You know, I talk about that when we're dealing with content, and I'm going to have to talk about that a lot when we're dealing with something that's 308 pages of content. There's two main attributes. What can I do with the content from a plug and play aspect? Can I take this right now, bring it right to my table? Is there something here that I can bring and get me through 6 hours of gameplay now, tonight? And then the second part, the second attribute is, does this content inspire? Even if I don't plan on using this in my game, it's not a fit for my table, or getting me through that next 6 hour session, is there something that can get the wheels turning, some seeds that can be planted that I can run with? So right here, you're getting a little bit of story and stuff that you need to delve into. You've got a lot that you have to chew through. And as I start to scroll through, we start to get through so much stuff in part one. I mean, I'm still on story. I mean, I'm reading kind of a book here at this point, like a novel. And then I'll get some charts. Right? And I'll get maybe some bits that I can chew on and say, okay, I can plug and play this guy into my game. But then because of how I understand you have these separating blocks on a lot of tables, you'll see it everywhere. It's in every D&D book official, where you'll get, you know, option 1 is this, and usually it's blank, as is the case there. And then you'll get option 2 and then option 3, and every even numbered option has sort of this transparent bar behind it to kind of create a separating point. But because we have so much text, you end up with this big box. That's a table, but visually my eye gets drawn to similar information, which again are these little pop-ups or pop-outs, I should say, that are giving me information sort of speaking from creator to reader. But then you're kind of stuck in story mode through this, where it's sort of investing and delving into the game itself, the gameplay parts of it. And as I start to go through, there's so much stuff here. And yes, there are some things that kind of follow that module adventure format, where here's section 1 and 2 and 3, and here's the indicated details on that. But as I start to go through, what I think happens with this first part, and I'll continue scrolling through, you'll see what I mean, is it'll every once in a while, there's just a lot to read. There's a lot to digest for me to figure out, what am I using right now? Like, I just want information on this one specific thing. Is it here for me? The best way that I can kind of explain what's here is, I'm a fitness professional, right? I'm going to kind of digress a little bit, but it's a good explanation point. You know kettlebells, the big iron ball with the handle kind of brought over from Russia. There is this, like, I'm not saying he's the world's foremost expert, but he's an expert on kettlebell training. He's not a very good coach, though. He's really difficult to follow from a communication level, but his knowledge level is insane. It's obvious. I've watched all of his videos. The way he speaks, someone made a comment on a YouTube video years ago, and it kind of drove home what I'm trying to say with part 1 of this content here. Basically, what they said is he has so much knowledge on kettlebell training and how to use them for exercise. He kind of takes all of that information, he wrangles it through in his head, and then when he speaks, it all comes out at the same time. Like, he jumbles it all like a bag of Skittles. He jumbles it all in his mouth, and then when he speaks, all of that information comes out at once. And it feels like there's so much content here for part 1 of explaining, as it said in the very sort of beginning in the introduction, of how to create some adventure within a plane or someplace outside of the material plane. There's so much content here, but the flow and the sort of the flow chart of it and then the organization is really difficult to follow. And it's hard for me to separate between when I'm just going to back up a little bit as a dungeon master and just read and kind of see where the story might go. And then, okay, here's some tables I can use at the table tonight. Okay, I'm going to cut and paste this and bring this as a reference sheet or some sort of a cheat sheet or cliff notes. One thing I like with the new content that's being released, with whether it's Wildmount and Eberron and such, and even Baldur's Gate, which I'm currently running, they have a lot of sort of pre-section stuff of, before you get into this section, here's a flowchart. Here's an idea of where your story should go in flowchart mode. And I think something like this could have benefited from something like that, because it becomes difficult for me to figure out what I want to use. There's so much here. There's clearly a lot if I want to delve into it, but I'm not sure where to begin. And that is the main sort of detriment to this first section. And that's kind of the main point that I want to drive home with this part 1, which is the only part of this whole 300 pages that I'm not quite fond of. Now, though I've kind of just rambled about the inconsistencies and parts I don't like about part 1, notice as we start to get through part 1, which is kind of more the same treatment, and there's a lot here, folks. Again, there's a ton here. We're only dealing with 65 pages of the 308. So we haven't even gotten, through a third of the book yet. Not even close. We haven't even gotten through a quarter of the book. The content's there. It's just really hard to navigate through, and it was initially a turnoff. But because it was sent to me, and because I'm like, well, I only went through 65 pages. Let me give it a chance. Let's see what else is here. I mean, come on. I've got 240 pages left. Is it more of the same? I am absolutely enamored with the remaining content within this tome, within this 308-page PDF. As we start to scroll through, part 2 is deities and other powers. What follows are pictures of Bane. Storyline. Kind of like what you got in part 1, right? Here's story. Here's some stuff to just read through, sort of at your leisure. But then you have mechanical bits. You have Bane. Now, we're dealing with high CR stuff. In the beginning, it does mention, and I should have mentioned that earlier, so I apologize for that. There is another piece of content called Epic Characters that was put out by the same individuals here. And they say that while you don't need it, it's recommended. Because much of the stuff in that book deals with characters at level 21 and above. Things way beyond what's in official material. So a lot of this stuff, it might work for the highest tier of gameplay or your level 20 group. But a lot of this stuff really works hand in hand when you're dealing with characters and PCs that are beyond level 20, epic level handbook stuff. So you might want to look into that Epic Characters book as well, and I'll put a link in the description as to where you can find that. Regardless, notice how I always talk about content from being, is there anything I can plug and play, bring to my table now? Or is there anything that's just going to at least inspire me? This section, part 2, the deities and other powers, does both for me. Now, you might be wondering, how do I take a CR 42 creature and plug and play that into my game? What the hell campaign am I running, aside from running this, that this is going to work as a reasonable encounter for my group? CR 42 is going to completely stomp your level 20 characters. I don't think they can handle this thing. We're dealing with Bane, though, right? We're dealing with a greater deity. From a plug and play aspect, the amount of detail that was put into, I mean, look at the fact that it's not only fitting on its own entire page, our font size has gone down to like 5 point just to try and fit this guy's stat block in. So look at the amount of work that's been done on the traits he has, on the legendary actions, on the various actions that he can use, the Black Gauntlet, the Grasp of Imminent Death, change shape, change size. These are little traits that I can pick and pull from, almost like a table or a list, that I can apply to cultists and beings that follow Bane, that worship him. As I start to scroll through and we see the Orc Pantheon, and you get followers, there's an old clan of orcs up in the north. And we're talking CR1, CR2, CR3 orcs. And maybe the chieftain has a few elements of Bagtru, this CR37, the god of strength. And that is the best way that he can kind of show his faith to that god, is he starts to demonstrate and exemplify, is that the word? The various things that this god can do. So I can plug and play a few of these abilities. Adds his con modifier to AC. When the PCs are fighting your CR7 Orc Chieftain, and they're like, why is this guy so hard to hit? He has this thing called Unarmored Defense. He has Reckless and Rampage. But you have some plug and play elements. Of course you have Inspiration. You know, think of all of these guys, these real high CRs. When that 7-year-old comes to your table, and they want to know about Dungeons and Dragons, right? And they ask you questions. They don't care about the balance of CRs. They just say, I want to see Superman. I want to see Godzilla, which might be the Tarrasque. I want Smog, because that's what I saw in Lord of the Rings. I want Goku. How do you quantify the larger-than-life, really cool parts, right? We all want, and we all are enamored, and that's why they're iconic, Beholders and Mind Flayers and Ancient Red Dragons. We all want the Tarrasque. We all want that powerful stuff. And you're getting so much here on CRs way beyond the scope of what's currently in any official book. I have the Legendary Bundle of D&D Beyond, and as I sort through CRs, there's, I think, over 1,700, nearly 2,000 monsters. There's 20 monsters per page on screen, and I have 80 plus pages. On the last page, there might be 8 to 10 monsters at a CR that's above a 28. Yes, it's a very narrow gameplay because not many people are going to fight against your CR28 stuff, but you're talking about things that are only in like Prince of the Apocalypse, Out of the Abyss, the guild leaders from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, the Tarask, and maybe some ancient dragons. Iconic stuff. That's it. There's like 40 plus monsters in this book that are past CR30. You're getting stuff that is not previously seen in any current existing books. It is way beyond the scope of what's out there. Look at the amount of fuel that's here within this guy, where you have the orc god of darkness and stealth. Every half-orc rogue in your world reveres this guy. They follow him. His name is Shargas. One of his actions is something called the Nightblade. Melee weapon attack plus 21, of course. I mean, this guy's CR37, right? He will kill anything. Does a bunch of piercing damage, and then you have to make a DC 20 con saving throw, taking 10d10 cold damage. Also, if you fail that saving throw, while in darkness, it becomes covered in a thin sheet of ice, having its movement speed halved until it takes fire damage or until you take an action to take the ice off of you. That is an action of Shargas, the CR37 orc god of stealth and darkness. That has now inspired me to create a legendary item. You can see how there's so much content here that provides inspiration, and we're only talking about the orc pantheon. As we start to go through, you also have the Goblinoid Pantheon, with a piece of artwork that fits in the epic level 7-year-old wanting to see superheroes statted. Look at this guy. Look at what that sickle, scythe, axe, whatever that damn weapon is. It's got a heart chained in the middle. I mean, look how iconic and epic this looks. And here is an entire stat block for him. So I love that they're treading on territory that has previously been untouched. It's almost one of those where that guy's on the cover of the book. We don't want to stat him. Who would ever want to fight him? But some people want to see that stuff. Some people want that inspiration. They want to know what sort of things a CR42 goblin might be able to do and use and have, because that might inform the way the regular CR1/2 goblins in my world live. You've got hobgoblin gods and pantheon. You have the Duragar and gnomes. As we start to scroll through, I mean, we have a lot in here. A Deep Duera, CR37, the Avatar, the Illithus Slayer. There is a wealth of content here, just within Part 2, folks. As we get into Part 3, you're getting into the character options. You have 2 new subraces. You have something called the Bladeling, and then you have a new gnome option called the Spriggan. And it simply just says, because the Spriggans are unable to feel love or discern beauty, they are exceedingly rare as adventurers. Ask your DM if you can play a member of this subrace, which has the gnome traits that are in the PHB, plus the ones below. Like, I think you pick, rock gnome or something like this. Now you pick the Spriggan, your con goes up by 1, you have your age and your alignment stuff, and then they have an ability that allows them to giant growth, basically to grow to huge, and then kind of shrink back down. And then you have the Bladeling, which is its entire own sort of new race. For subclasses, we have, I'm not going to go over all of them, it would take too long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You have 18 new subraces, or subclasses. You have a couple of new ways for the monks. You have a new fighter called the Eternal Blade. With all of the treatment, again, I can't speak to the balance of this, but you know what? When you're dealing with content, you're looking at subclasses that rival the amount of stuff that's in Xanathars from subclasses. You're looking at monsters already that rival some parts of the monster manual, like that level of depth and scope. And then because the monster manual might have 1 or 2 CR26 and above, you're looking at stuff that doesn't even exist in any other monster books. But why do players or DMs create house rules? Because that shows you, even with official content, stuff play tested, it's not always a fit. Goodberry and Leomund's Tiny Hut and Find Familiar are spells that are officially written. Therefore, they've been run through the playtest treatment. But I've nerfed them, I've changed them, they don't fit for my game. So even with official content, you still need to run through it with a fine-tooth comb and figure out if it fits your game. So it doesn't matter that we can't say this stuff is not official, but why are we always so fascinated with the stuff in Unearthed Arcana and reading through all these new ideas? Because some DMs just allow players to run wild and play whatever they want. And now if they want to be the Path of Metallurgy Barbarian, if they want to be the Order of the Warmonger Bloodhunter, if they want to run the Oath of Fulmination or Oath of Unity as a Paladin, you have that here because it's given the full treatment. I mean, and it pays respect to where it comes from. You have an Artificer using the Artificer stuff from Eberron Rising from the Last War, but now, in addition to the Battlesmith and stuff like this, you also have the Stormsmith and the Surveyor with all of the appropriate content. that fits. So it kind of feels like Unearthed Arcana, unplay-tested, or whatever the word is, not play-tested stuff, but fuel, ideas, options for you. There's a lot there. There's 18 new subclasses, 2 new subraces. And then, if we go past the wizard, these are, I don't know how many are here. That's all new spells. That's a lot of new content. Mythic options, these are things that deal with options for characters that are like at 30th level. So that's the stuff from the Epic character book. I'll put a link in the description where you can find that. So this is kind of beyond the current scope of playable characters within official D&D right now. Then you get into bestiary. I'm just going to scroll through very quickly. These are all new monsters. Yeah, they're made to fit and fall within what's going to happen and occur in Acheron, but the amount of stuff that you might be able to use here, and notice we're looking at CR5. We're looking at a CR14. We're looking at CR3. So these are now things that'll work in any campaign. It doesn't have to be the highest tier of gameplay or beyond level 20. I have entire species. If I want to create something called the Bladeling tribe or a clan, kind of like Zerglings, I now have a commander and a conjurer and a priest and a warrior that's on the fringes. I have an entire sort of hierarchy and organization of groups of monsters that I can use at my table by using these stat blocks. I'm going to keep scrolling through, and notice as I scroll through, I'm only in letter D, folks, as I keep going. So now we truly have a monster manual of content. And again, if we look at the back where we get into the best parts, which is all these tables, sorting by CR, here's the amount of stuff on page 1, every one of these monsters, and they're only at CR 7. Look at past CR 30. You have all of this. There's no book that has that many monsters past CR 30. So in sort of summary, what we have is we have 18 subclasses. That's content that is akin to what you'd find in Xanathar's. You have a number of monsters and bestiary that rivals what you'll find in any monster book, which will cost $30 in and of itself. Xanathar's is $30 in and of itself. You have an entire Avernus level of adventure. Yeah, it's difficult to navigate your way through, but you have Avernus, which is $30 in and of itself. That's just part 1 of this book. Yes, you're spending $30 here, but I don't think it's a mistake that this thing has now jumped up to being like the 3rd most popular piece of content on DM's Guild. You're getting 3-4 mini books of content. Forget about the playtest aspect of it, because as I've already mentioned, I need to wrangle through official stuff anyway. Not all of those things fit my table, my group, but the amount of fuel, that one orc god of stealth, where I mentioned his action was that Nightblade, it now makes me want to create a weapon that's based on that. That's that one monster, that one god, that one stat block. You saw how many there were within that section, part 2. You see how much content is here. Here's the amount of monsters. You saw there was an entire page, 30, 40, 50 new spells. The amount of stuff that's here, I'm absolutely blown away. As I said, it was kind of indicative to me in the first part of like, this is going to be kind of a slog to get through. I don't know if I want to get through this stuff. I'm not going to use this adventure anyway. There's too much story. But as I gave it a chance, as I gave it time, this is all stuff that hasn't been previously done. You might have added the Abyss and Princes of the Apocalypse and the Guild Leaders from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, but you're still kind of capped at CR 25, 26, 27. I want to see the things that a 7-year-old would want to see. I want to see Godzilla. I don't want you to just tell me about the gods that those orcs in the northern area of your world worship. I want to see what that looks like stat-wise. I may not ever use it. It's going to kill my group, of course. But when I present that world-ending threat, that end boss, that climactic battle, I want to get an idea of what that might look like, mechanically. And in this, you get that. Except you get it 40 times over. And all told, combined for 308 pages, you're getting 3 to 4 books worth of content. And most importantly, if I was to try and make this myself, that's one thing that I always consider when I look at stuff. I'm savvy in layout design. I can lay this out in Adobe InDesign. I can make my own content. The amount of hours and time that this has saved me, that I can just read through what they've created, it's worth the price of purchase. I'm going to put links in the description as to where you can get this. And as I said, once you click on that, you'll see ways that you might be able to get and acquire an actual hardcover physical book. The artwork that's here that accompanies those monsters. I mean, you saw that Maglabiet, whatever the hell his name is, the Goblin Lord, sitting on his throne. I mean, that was iconic. That's epic. You see Grumpsh. This is really good stuff, guys. Thank you so much, Mark, for sending me this. I hope all of you stay safe. Get into something like this. Use it for inspiration. And create your own CR40 encounter. That's all I have for you folks. Thanks, everyone, and take care.